الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه ونبيه وخليله أرسله الله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره الكافرون أما بعد يقول تعالى في كتابه الكريم في سورة التوبة قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم وأموال اقترفتموها وتجارة تخشون كسادها ومساكن ترضونها أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله فتربصوا حتى يأتي الله بأمره والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. Say, if your fathers and your sons and your brothers and your spouses and your clan and your worldly gains and goods that you have acquired, and the commerce whereof you fear a decline thereof, and the dwindling in which you take pleasure, and dwelling that in which you take pleasure. If all these are dearer to you than God and his messenger and the struggle in his cause, then wait until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings his wrath upon those who are fasiqs. Wallahu la yahdi al-qawma al-fasiqeen. Brothers and sisters, my khutbah today is going to be about fiqh, type of fiqh that we probably most of the time ignore. But that fiqh is very important, especially in the time that we live in. It's important to us, especially in the time that we live in. Now, let me start by the ayah that I just recited. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala counted most or almost everything that one would aspire for in dunya here is. قل إن كان آباؤكم وأبناؤكم وإخوانكم وأزواجكم وعشيرتكم, everything that you look forward to here in the life herein, or a commerce, or a trade, or a business, or a nice home, or if any of this أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله. So one side, one way, one side have all the above worldly gains, whether it is relatives or it is material. And on the other side, أحب إليكم من الله ورسوله وجهاد في سبيله. Three things: Allah, his messenger, his apostle, and jihad fi sabilillah. If this is better to you than this, fatarabbasu, then watch what's going to happen, what's going to befall you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give guidance to those who are fasiqs. Let me start by a term that we all hear, fiqh. And fiqh linguistically means a deep knowledge of something. But religiously, fiqh means jurisprudence. And jurisprudence is the art, is the science of extracting rules and regulations from Quran and from the Sunnah, and making it into a halal or haram, or making it into the law of the Muslim Ummah. That is the jurisprudence aspect of fiqh, that people that have that much deep knowledge of Islam, of the life of the Sahaba, of the Prophet ﷺ, of the Hadith, and so on and so forth, those are the people that qualify to extract rulings from Quran and from Sunnah and make it into a law to us. And example of that is the four Imams, Al-Shafi'i, wa Hanbal, wa Hanifa, and wa Malik. Those are the people that were able in the early phase of Islam to extract those laws and regulations, and they are living with us till now, those laws and regulations. But linguistically, fiqh means that sincere or deep knowledge of any matter that comes into one's life. Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah says, ليس الفقيه, the knowledgeable person is not a person who knows the difference between halal and haram. But the knowledgeable person is the person that knows the least of the two evils and the best of the two benefits to his community or to himself or to his family. This is the gist of my khutbah today. That we, even though we are not necessarily scholars in Islam, scholars in the religions, in the tafsir or the sunnah or the surah or the history of the prophet, but yet there is still some duty on the layman Muslim today that will erect his life that is equally as important to his life as the fiqh of jurisprudence that we talked about, or that is the specialty of Al-Imam Hanbal, Hanifa, Malik, and Al-Shafi'i. Now, the ayah that I just recited said that. It says, you should be able to distinguish between worldly gains and jihad fi sabilillah, and they believing in Allah and His Messenger. The first step is being able to distinguish between two matters in one's life. And from the time that we wake up in the morning till the time we go to bed at the end of the day, we are faced with hundreds or maybe even thousands of situations in which we make a decision. It doesn't necessarily have to be a halal and haram, but it could be a decision that may ultimately affect our religion, our life, our worldlyhood, or our life after. And those very little decisions accumulate at the end and makes the what I'm calling about the type of fiqh that we all should know. Give you another example. And I think the examples that I use are mostly examples that we all are familiar with. Yet we think about them, or we go about them, we just pass by them, and we don't contemplate, we don't ponder about the meaning behind these examples. Who of us does not know that there is a surah in the Quran called Al-Mujadala? And who of us does not know that Al-Mujadala was because a woman complained to the Prophet ﷺ from an oath that her husband threw upon her? Khawla bint Thalaba. We all know that story, but we probably miss the gist of the story as I will tell it to you right now. Khawla bint Thalaba went to the Prophet ﷺ complaining from her husband, who told her, Anti alayya ka dhahru ummi, means you, to me, almost the expression means that you are divorced. You are no longer my wife. I cannot cohabitate with you. And then when he came back to his senses, he wanted to go back to their normal way of life. She refuses and goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and she complains to him of what he said and what he's trying to do thereafter. And the Prophet, having no ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time, tell her, just be patient, be kind to your cousin. He was her cousin and her husband. And at that time comes the wahi, until Sayyidina Muhammad, the ruling in that case, that if he did this before he goes back to the normal relationship with his wife, he should fast 2 months, or he should feed, or he should free a slave, or fast 2 months, or feed 60 miskeens. And then the Prophet ﷺ tells the lady tell your husband to fast 2 months. She said, he's old, he cannot do it. And he said, or first tell him to free a slave. And she said, he doesn't have any, he's poor. Now fast 2 months, he cannot, he is very weak. Then feed 60 miskin. She said, he doesn't have, he is one of the poorest in the Medina. Then the Prophet told her, then wait till we get the sadaqah and we'll give him some of that he can feed 60 miskin with. And she said, and I will help him with the other half. The Prophet will donate half, and she will give half. Now look at the situation here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the ruling of 3 conditions, but the man did not do any of them. The Prophet ﷺ did not say either he does that or he is out of the fold of Islam, but the Prophet thought and took the situation. This is fiqh al-waqa'. This is the Prophet ﷺ applying fiqh. Even the Prophet himself, the one that gets the wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, comes sometimes that he has to apply fiqh al-waqa'. And fiqh al-waqa' here, he just looked at the situation. The man is old, he doesn't have a slave to free, and he doesn't even have food or have any wealth to feed 60 miskins with. Then what would he do? Then the Prophet ﷺ found another way to fulfill the condition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also to continue to keep the ruling for whoever can afford any of the 3 conditions in the future. Fiqh al-waqa'. Another example, Sayyidina Musa walks with his assistant, his servant, and meets Al-Khidr in Surah Al-Kahf. And the first thing he meets or he does with Sayyidina Al-Khidr, and Al-Khidr warned him, he told him, إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعَيَ صَبْرًا. You are not going to be able to bear or to understand whatever I am doing. Why? Because one of them, Al-Khidr, has more knowledgeable of fiqh al-waqi'. He knows the matters of the conditions of the area that they were in right now. Sayyidina Musa traveled till he came to a place. Allah told him, at that place you will find the person that will teach you more of what you don't know. So then فلما ركب حتى إذا ركب في السفينة خرقها قال أخرقتها لتغرق أهلها لقد جئت شيئا إمرا. Then when we know the story in Surah Al-Kahf that both of them rode in the ship and Al-Khidr started to dig a hole in the ship. And then Moses was appalled and he told them, how would you, those people took us for free to take us from one side of the sea to the other side, and then you deface their ship. And then he, at the end of the ayat, he explained to him what he was doing. In this case, there was a situation. Either the Khidr defaces the ship, either he does a little damage to the ship, or leave it nice and fully capable of its function. And then there is a king. وَكَانَ وَرَاءَهُمْ مَلِكٌ يَأْخُذُ كُلَّ سَفِينَةٍ غَصْبًا. There was a king in the area that when he sees a ship like that, he likes it and he take it from the people. أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها. That it was those who were miskins, have the only way to earn living is from that ship. And if that king sees it, he's going to take it. But if he sees that the ship has a hole in it, then he will leave it for them. So for the ship to be defaced with those people is better than when the king take it. Now the two actions are in the best interest of the people to keep, even though the ship is no longer as good as it used to be. Fiqh al-muwazanat, the fiqh of priorities. There is a priority to situations. Who of us in his life, daily life, does not face situations where he has to compromise between two things, two good things or two bad things, and he has to choose the best of the two good things or the best or the least evil of the two bad things? Every one of us faces situations in his life where he has to choose between situations like these. If his motive is like the ayah that I recited in Surah, if his motive is worldly gain, then he gets his worldly gain here, or he never gets anything rewarded by in the life after. If his motive is always to please Allah in his choices, in the fiqh of waqa', in his knowledge of what is happening around him, in the state of affairs of the ummah or himself or his family, whatever the matter that he is deciding on, if his motive is to choose the best that pleases Allah, the least of the two evils, or the best of the two benefits that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he has applied that fiqh of waqa' himself. He doesn't have to be a scholar. He can just apply himself and have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as his guidance with the knowledge that we know. What is the importance of something like that? We see that our lives today, in the day and age that we live in, is changing around us. 20 years ago, in the 1990s, then there was something that we heard about. We probably forgot about it today. We kept hearing everybody talking about perestroika, and perestroika was the change of Russia from a system to a system, irrespective. This is not my point. But at that time, when we started to hear about perestroika, and we are the same community here, did not change anything of our lives here, but yet in those 20 years, the world order changed from a competition between East and West, whereby the poor countries, the third world countries, were left alone by the challenge between the two, to a new world order where there is only one power. That one power is the only power, a unilateral power in the whole world, and the Soviet Union became and almost descended to a country or a nation of the second degree. At that time, that was a change that happened that changed our lives without us even understanding what is going on, without us paying attention, because we often ignore fiqh of waqi'. Waqi' means the life that we live in. We don't look at the matters around us with a decisive eye, with an intricate eye. We just spend our days by the custom. We used to do that yesterday, we'll do it today. And that is as bad to us as it is to any community that started from the days of Adam to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, till very soon after, a couple of generations after, two brothers killed, one of them kills the other. How did the people change from solely worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Adam came in to this world and Eve, and then change it in that a couple of generations later, one of the brothers killed his other brother. Little by little, things change, and if we don't pay attention to what's going around us, it's going to touch us when it's too late to fix. And I'll give you a very important example now. Actually, that example is the one that made me choose that point. I tried to find out how can we avoid the disaster that's going to behold the whole Muslim Ummah anywhere in the world in few years to come, not necessarily 100 years, not necessarily 20 years, in very, very few years to come. And it will enter every home of our homes, if it didn't yet. How can we avoid that when we still have the way to avoid it? The issue I'm talking about is homosexuality. And now, let me read to you when I try to find out how the world look at homosexuality, and just I wanted to see it. Of course, not everybody, even unfortunately some Muslims, will look at that option, at that issue as what we should be looking at it from a religious point of view. So I just looked at I Googled some titles, and the titles that I see: gays in Pompeii. Pompeii is a city in Italy, and interestingly enough, what happened to Lut at the days of Sayyidina Ibrahim and Sayyidina Lut, what happened to them then when جعلنا عليها سافلها وأمطرنا عليها حجارة من سجيل منضود مثوبة عند ربك وما هي من الظالمين ببعيد. Stones coming, and we know the story as if it is a bedtime story that we tell it to our kids. But we didn't know that Pompeii, almost 1,500 years later, did the same exact thing. Conditions are exactly the same. Conditions the same. In the Qarya of Lut, they were rich people. وإذا أردنا أن نهلك قرية أمرنا مترفيها ففسقوا فيها فحق عليها القول. Always destruction, mostly destruction comes when there is a rich luxury people. It starts by those people that think that they own the world, own their destiny, whether it is here or thereafter. وما أظن الساعة قائمة ولئن رددت إلى ربي لأجدن خيرا منها منقلبا. The two people that were debating with each other in Surah Al-Kahf again. I'm sorry for the time. I'm not translating every ayah I recite. But everybody, when he is rich enough, when one of the two men has gardens and have progeny and have children, and he was wealthy, He said, ما أظن الساعة قائمة. I don't think that there is a life after. And if there is, then Allah will give me even better than what He gave me now. So this is what happens when people are rich. The Lut Qarya, the village of Lut was rich. Pompeii in Italy, 1500 years later, was rich. They were people that started أتأتون الفاحشة ما سبقكم بها من أحد من العالمين. They were the very first people to commit that type of fahisha. And we know which fahisha I'm talking about. They were the first people. Yet today, people are not claiming, are trying to propagate it by lying and saying, no, 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 this was ever there since even the days of Adam. Only to convince the ignorant people, to convince the laymen, whether it is Muslims or non-Muslims, that this is natural, you have to accept it. So 1500 years later, then comes those people, they were also rich. And then when they were rich and luxurious, then they started to look for something else. And then they started to commit that fahisha as those people started to commit that fahisha. Those people were advised by Lut, Sayyidina Lut, and those people were advised by the cities around them. But then when the wrath of Allah came, it came in the form, as the Quran tells us, فَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ مَّنضُودٍ مُّسَوَّمَةً عِندَ رَبِّكَ وَمَا هِيَ مِنَ الظَّالِمِينَ بِبَعِيدٍ. What happened to Pompeii? A volcano, Vesuvius volcano, that exploded, and scientists today tell the world that it took less than a second to destroy the whole village, because if it took more than that, it would burn the bodies of the people. But it didn't. What that volcano did, what the ashes coming from the volcano did, sedimented and froze them into acts that they were doing at that time. Something coming from the volcano erupted to 9 miles into the sky and started to come back on them, same way exactly. Now, I brought the point I wanted to talk about. Hold that thought for a second. Now, let me ask you the question, maybe a couple of questions. Do you really think that the army of Fir'aun that was completely destroyed did not have a believer? In Surah Mu'min, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ رَجُلٌ مُؤْمِنٌ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَكْتُمُ إِيمَانَهُ. Means there were believers also in the clan of Fir'aun, not of the clan of Moses. There were believers. And that army, it makes sense to believe that there were also Muslims or also believers in that army that were destroyed with them. When the calamity comes to everybody, because those who did not believe but acted but helped also get the same punishment. Now, do you really believe that the people in the village of Lut or in Pompeii knew that even they determined the time of the eruption of the volcano today by the hour and by the second when the volcano erupted? Do you really think that those people knew that in few seconds there would be an eruption? They were going about their lives normally, as that soldier in the army of Fir'aun that went with him irrespective, just obeying the orders. What is really astonishing here is, are we really now, us, seeing what's going to be happening again to those people advocating homosexuality? We may be in the pre-era, in the very, very few hours before the wrath of Allah comes again on us. Because we are allowing that to happen, because we are leaving that to happen. And I'll tell you, what can we do about it? There are so many things that we can do about it. One of the things that now we are distinguishing, unfortunately, leaders of the Muslim community distinguishing between politically correct and religiously correct. It's not politically correct to criticize homosexuality. It may be religiously inaccurate, incorrect, but I shouldn't be talking about that. Very few that are talking about that and saying, wake up, because the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be coming soon. Let me continue in the second khutbah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه. So I was saying that بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستعيذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رسولا كثيرا أما بعد. I was saying that if you Google now about that issue, you find that the titles in Google or in any search, it will be a praising title. Like, it's a cultural, it's enrichment, it is something good, it is artistic to have that type of culture emanating within the human beings. This is the actions of shaitan in some of the human beings that subhanahu wa ta'ala said that is going to happen, and it's predicted that it will happen to us. Now, let me just tell you, and unfortunately, I didn't intend it. There is an Arabic proverb that says, شر البلية ما يضحك. So there is a proverb, an Arabic proverb says that, the worst of a disaster is what you laugh after you hear it. I'm going to tell you a joke, and unfortunately, it has a very deep meaning that I saw in the internet. Two people, a comedian was just presenting this. I was talking to a man the other day who was leaving the country. Why you are leaving the country? He said, because of homosexuality. What? Why are you leaving? Because he said, 300 years ago, punishment for the one who's homosexual was by hanging or by drowning. And then 100 years ago, punishment was by condemning to death by hanging. And 50 years ago, if you are a homosexual, you are flogged, means lashed, you are flogged and get 20 years in prison. And 20 years ago, if you are homosexual, you are fined 200 pounds. Pounds means that the comedian was probably from England. 200 pounds and sent to prison for 2 years. 5 years ago, punishment became a small fine and then a pardon and then a warrant that you are not going to do it again. Then why are you leaving? He said, because why are you leaving now? He said, because I'm worried about them making it compulsory. Now they are making it compulsory on your kids at schools. And just this week, there was a psychiatric in Canada, in the Canadian education system, saying, get your kids out from public schools because of the teaching of homosexuality in the schools. That's where fiqh al-waqi' comes into play. There is a story that's always, we hear every once in a while. The story is the story of the tale of the boiling frog. And I mentioned that before, maybe some of you heard it from me, that if you throw a frog in boiling water, it will immediately jump off. But if you put it in nice, cozy, warm water and you start heating the water, then the frog will actually acclimate till it boils to death. And at that time, it's too late for the frog to do anything at all. That's what's happening to us. Like the joke said, like that comedian was saying, 200 years, there was something. Today, there is something else. And it is the gradual interpretation. the comment on that story was, it is frequently used in economics or business and marketing to point out that change does not come suddenly. Change comes in gradual, and that's what they are doing to us. And that's what fiqh al-waqi' warns the Muslims, that this is what's been happening to us, to wake up. What to do? Homeschooling. Okay, forget about the difference between, maybe homeschooling is not as great as public schooling. Maybe is not as great as institutional education, but it comes with a very hefty tax. It comes with a child, a generation, and he's not a foreign one. He's my son and your son, or my brother or your brother. He is somebody that's, or my cousin or your cousin, somebody growing up in a society that tells him homosexuality and shove it down him, and little by little they are going to make it down, shoving it down his throat, and little by little making it obligatory on everybody to believe that homosexuality is a norm of life. Now, this is just but an example, and I chose an example that really may harm this community or the Muslim Ummah in the future, in the years to come, when generations gradually change from abhorring an action to looking the other side or the other way, and to forgetting it, to accepting it, and to applauding it. I think the next Lut village or the next Pompeii, God knows, may be in San Francisco, where if you look in this country for where it is more vivid with these claims for LGBTs, you will find that it is that list. And we will see we are no different from what happened in the past. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give us the Quran just to like a telltale story. He gave us the Quran so that we learn from the wisdoms of those people that preceded us and what happened to them. Brothers and sisters, all it takes that we start going back to our religion and fiqh al-waqi', that I mean every one of us is capable. Allah gave us that innate to distinguish between right and wrong. If that right and wrong is not for worldly gain, right or wrong for somebody may be, I'll take that job because it gives more money, but I'm going to be selling wine. And that guy will say, I will not take that job, or I'll take another job, it gives me less money, but I'll be close to a mosque and my kids could go to that mosque for education. This is the fiqh of waqi', the fiqh that the Prophet ﷺ himself applied, that Moses applied, that we all should be applying in our lives. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون احسنه. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات المؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك قريب سميع مجيب الدعوات يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه، وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر، ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا من لا يخافك ولا يرحمنا. اللهم انصر دينك وكتابك وعبادك الصالحين. اللهم ارفع مقتك وغضبك عنا، وقنا من البلاء ما نعلم وما لا نعلم وما أنت به أعلم، إنك أنت الله العز الأكرم. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم واستغفروه يغفر لكم وأقم الصلاة. There is some announcement here. Reminder, please continue to keep your masks on while you are inside IONA Masjid. We find masks thrown in the parking lot after Jum'ah prayer. Please do not litter around the masjid. IONA Center is a non-smoking area. Summer school beginning on Monday, June 27 till August 18. IONA Eid Bazaar is cancelled for July 2nd. IONA and Youth of Ummah will be having an Eid picnic on July 17. donation of clothes. The bin is moved behind the cafeteria. The closed bin for donations is moved behind. Remember IONA in your prayers and donate.